Hello, everyone's Forest Focus. The Nottingham Forest players report back for pre-season training today. We'll discuss who will be in the squad come the first game of the season, as Anthony Elanga remains a Forest player for now. Ola Aina should for another 3 years, and Callum Hudson-Odoi might be extending his stay as well. So joining me to discuss all that and more, first of all, is Michael Temple. Temps, morning, how are you?
Morning, fellas. Feeling good, thank you. Big win for Notts in the cricket yesterday. And here we are talking football.
Good to have you with us. Good to have you on board. Good to have Garry Birtles back with us, Reds legend. How are you, Gary?
Yeah, top of the world, thank you. Apart from England's cricket performance yesterday, maybe.
I know, that was a bit grim,
but then you watch Alcaraz play tennis and he brings a real smile to your face. It's unbelievable. You know, watching top sportsmen at the peak of their powers, it's just incredible.
Yeah. Yeah,
we're trying to get you off topic here, Davies, aren't we? Trying to
get Well, it's been a pretty shambolic start because people might have noticed I read that intro off my phone because I put all my notes in the wrong podcast file. So we start as we mean to go on, certainly. Let's kick off then with Anthony Elanga. I think we spoke on Friday when it was reported, and the Times said that a £55 million bid had been accepted. Seems like that certainly wasn't the case. And although a deal's close, the media in the Northeast, who I think it's fair to say are briefed by Newcastle's press people, it certainly seems that way. They're reporting some complications and delays, I would say. Craig Hope, the Mail correspondent, understands he tweeted, and a deal for Elanga between Forest and Newcastle remains close, but it's also complicated. Some deals are still being worked on. There's hope it will get sorted, but until those details are agreed, ... And Luke Edwards, who works for the Telegraph, says interest in Elanga is ongoing and Newcastle are finding it tough to get deals over the line. I'm just going to ask you for some wild speculation, Temps, I guess, about what's going on. Is this a case of Forest drawing the hardest bargain they can? Or do you even think there's a chance Elanga stays now? What's your very read from a distance here?
No, I don't think there's much chance that Elanga stays, but good that it's a tough deal to do. We shouldn't be easy to negotiate with. We've got a really, really good player under contract who has kicked on immeasurably. I think when we first signed him, he was probably seen as a bit of a pace merchant, but the quality of his crossing, the quality of his set pieces, the frequency of his assists have shown why he's such an asset to a Premier League team. And it shouldn't be easy to extract him from a club that's been upwardly mobile and is achieving success with him in the side. So I'm glad Newcastle are finding the deal tough to complete. I think it points to us negotiating pretty hard, but ultimately it's a move that the player wants and one that I expect it to go through. Will be handsomely rewarded. And the challenge comes, how do we reinvest that into our squad? Because when we've had these transfers in recent times, the manner in which we've reinvested it has proved to be positive. So you have to judge all these transfers through a backward-looking lens. Of course, I'll be disappointed when Elanga leaves. I think it will happen, and I'm totally trusting in the systems that we have set up our football club to find adequate replacements.
Just on Elanga and players coming back for pre-season training today, I'm pretty sure he's not back. It looks like from his social media he's not. I don't read a huge amount into that because some players have had extra time who've played international, so we don't know if this is a factor in it, but people will read into that certainly. Kevin says we'll all be surprised when Elanga signs a new contract. I suppose there is a small chance of that, but I don't see it. But that would certainly be great news. What's your general take on this Elanga situation, Gary? We've not had your view on it at all yet.
I'm a little bit disappointed, to say the least, because when he came from Manchester United, players only at that age only leave Manchester United because maybe it's not happening for him. You look at Rashford, and his career was maybe a little bit at a crossroads at that particular point. People were doubting his ability, doubting whether he could, get back to what he was when they first signed him or whatever. And Forest and Nuno just turned him round. Made him feel welcome, in a squad that was, massively together, great unity. And he was right up there with Morgan Gibbs-White in assists. And he was a handful. I just remember the Manchester United goal, when he ran the length of the pitch. And I think sometimes you've got to be careful what you wish for. I mean, I can remember I went to Manchester United years ago from Forest. There was a reason for that. I signed a 5-year contract. And if I'd have stayed there for 5 years, my house in Wilmslow would have been paid for. And I had a signing on fee as well. But after 2 years, I thought it's not quite going right here. I don't feel if it's going to be the right thing to do. And Forest came back in. I signed away my signing on fee, which was quite hefty in those days. and came back because I wanted to play football. And I just think sometimes agents get in players' minds a little bit too much. Yes, Newcastle had a great season. Everybody was delighted. I was delighted because it was nice to see changing of the guard. But then if he goes to Newcastle, doesn't quite work out, will he get a starting place? We've seen other players go, you go Jack Grealish, people like him go somewhere and it doesn't quite work out. I think he, one more season at Forest might have been okay. If it's the fair play rules coming into the equation, then, you can understand it a little bit. But I am a little bit disappointed. I'd love to have seen him stay. And, he would have been massive for us again this coming season.
What do you think about the fee, Temps? I was looking around earlier. Madueke to Arsenal looks like it's on for 50 million potentially. Cunha went for 60. Anthony Gordon went for 40 2 years ago to Newcastle, and Harvey Barnes was 38 million a year ago from a relegated team, or 2 years ago, I think it was. Sorry. So where does 55 to 60 million pitch for you? High enough or not right?
Yeah, it is. It's high enough. It's about in the right bracket. Because of the manner in which we brought him in, it creates PSR headroom, and it gives us the opportunity to keep Murillo, Morgan Gibbs-White for longer than we perhaps thought. If you rewind a year before the season that we've just had, and with the relative interest in those two players, we were pretty certain that they'd be on their way. That all that noise around Morgan Gibbs-White and Murillo has completely died off, and I think selling Elanga puts a bit of a moat around them. And if we look at the transfer from that perspective, we know at some point in the next 3 windows we had to offload to be PSR compliant. We're doing it now with Anthony Elanga. We're disappointed because he gets in our team and adds so much. But if that's a devil's choice between offloading one of those 3, I dare say it's probably the right call to make. I accept the argument about centre halves being a little bit easier to replace, and of course you've got real X factor on the wing there. But look, I'm trusting Forest to reinvest that cash. I think I would be surprised, maybe a little bit disappointed if we departed from the method that we've used and went and dropped 50 million, let's say, on a Fofana type player. But I don't think that's how we'll go. I think we'll use the money to sign 2 or 3 players. I think there's still the potential to offload Silva and Sosa and to be looking for a bit of a battalion of wingers. But we'll have had these plans in place for a long time now. There's 2 scout networks out there with Edu's Cabal and with Ross Wilson's group and everyone else. They will know who they want to go after. They will know there are players that we can add value to. And with 55 to 60 million pounds minus the sell-on fee to Man United in our pocket, we'll find a way to make this team as competitive as it's been this year.
The thing is that you mentioned Ross Wilson there, Temps. There's talk about him going to Newcastle, isn't there? Him leaving Forest, which would be a massive blow because I think he's done a fabulous job at the club. And, to lose somebody like that, is a big blow as well. So it could be a double whammy.
Yeah, Ross Wilson's on. It sounds like he's on a 2-man shortlist to be Newcastle's director of football or something like that, with a chap from Arsenal. So we'll wait and see. Just in terms of replacing Elanga, Gary, if he does go, how worried would you be about replacing that pure pace? I mean, I guess there's players in the foreign market, obviously, but there's players like Harvey Elliott we've been sort of tentatively linked with again, I saw over the weekend. You could look at other domestic options who are a bit more unproven. How much would you worry about replacing Elanga, or would you not be too concerned?
I would be worried about replacing Elanga because he did something that very few players in the Premier League could do last season. He frightens, ask any defender what frightens them more than anything: pace. And it was intelligent use of pace as well. It wasn't just, he's running the 100 metres in 9-point-something seconds. I mean, I'll go back to the Man United goal. People forget he carried that ball 75 yards, which is okay. You've got to carry the ball, but then you have to finish it. And he finished it brilliantly. And, his creative ability, I think he improved so much in that area from when he came from Manchester United. He got his head up and looked in, and Chris Wood benefited massively from, what him and Hudson-Odoi were doing. So I think he's going to be a massive loss if he does go, to replace him. And like you said, Temps, are we going to change the system we play that, upset so many people? But, maybe people will say, well, at the end of the season, people worked us out a little bit. You know, we didn't beat Brentford, we didn't beat Everton, we didn't beat Leicester, we didn't beat Chelsea. But then maybe that's that a lot of that's down to a bit of pressure, the Champions League and all that. But it's going to be an interesting few weeks for Nuno and the club. Just hope Ross Wilson stays. I'd love to see Elanga stay. Aina signing a contract is fantastic because he was one of our best players without a shadow of a doubt last season. He was tremendous. He caused so many problems for the opposition. And it's about the unity of that squad last season was just so evident. And you want that unity to be there again. And you want the players who are coming in to be able to, fit in very quickly with what we saw last season.
I think what I mean by changing the system, guys, is the manner in which we scout players to come in. I think that the departure for us would be losing a player on a high fee and trying to sign another one on a high fee. That's not our method. That's not going to create room in PSR. And if there's a failing in a £50 million signing and you're trying to offload, then you're taking a pretty significant hit. There's going to be a lot of focus on Anthony Elanga now. I think those that weren't watching Forest last season would perhaps be unaware just how prolific his assists have been, just how good his corners are, just how much control he has when running at pace. He's not going to be Anthony Elanga, the player that Forest rescued from the fringes at Man United. He's going to be Anthony Elanga, the £55 million winger. It's going to be one of the biggest transfers of the summer. And even if he stays now, we have to acknowledge that there's a remote chance of that happening. There's going to be a lot more football fans looking at Elanga and trying to assess why Newcastle have pursued him so seriously. But I just don't see us selling a player for 50 mil and looking to buy another one.
Just looking at the chat, there's a question on Jair Cunha. I've not seen any updates since that one, saying he signed a 5-year deal. So hopefully we'll hear more on that in the coming days, certainly. One of the things we've discussed, Gary, at quite a lot of length over the last few weeks, I mean, in some ways, this is a kind of a moot point because the offer has to be there. But if you were having to sell one of the crown jewels of the club for PSR reasons, we've discussed, would you sell Gibbs-White, Elanga or Murillo? If you were, gun to your head and you had to sell one of those three, for you, which one's the hardest to replace?
I still think Gibbs-White or Elanga. No disrespect to Murillo. I mean, he's a young lad and his partnership with Milenkovic was incredible. But the reason I say that is because strikers and creative players earn more. They do the hardest thing, and that's taking nothing away from defenders because I played centre half and everything. I know how difficult it is. But players who create things and make things and score, the players that are always going to go for more money because they do the hardest job in the business, which is put the ball in the net. And to create stuff there's massive pressure on that as well. Morgan Gibbs-White now, because he's in the England squad, is expected to do that week in, week out. And it's not always that easy because the Premier League is the toughest league in the world, without a doubt. Always has been and probably always will be. It's so difficult. And, he's similar age to Murillo. And, you want to see them progress. And it would have been great to build on what we achieved last season. It really would. And it's just so sad to see that being broken up. But it happens. It's football, and you have to get over things like that. If Elanga's going to go, fine. Wish him all the best. I can understand that he wants to go and play in the Champions League because that's a pinnacle apart from playing for your country. Playing in the Champions League, totally understand it. But he's still a young lad. And like I say, another season at Forest, I don't think have done him a lot of harm. But agents do those things. They tell them that that's the place to be, that's the tournament to be in. And if he goes, very good luck to him because he's been brilliant for Forest. I would bear him no ill whatsoever. But I'm just a little bit disappointed if he does go because what he did for Forest last season.
Ashley in the chat asked about Kouyabarno, another player I know have no info on. Sorry, Ashley. At Brighton, it looked like they're signing a left back, and they seem to be our main competition. So maybe that bodes well that we'll sign Kouyabarno as well. Just lastly on Elanga attempts to wrap it up in terms of a time scale. How quickly do we want this sorted? Really,
doesn't matter. Extract maximum cash. If that takes time, then great. I suppose in any game of brinksmanship, you've got to be thinking a little bit about what would happen if Newcastle were to walk away. I don't think we'd have any major problem offloading him proactively if we absolutely needed to. So there's no need for Forest to be soft in negotiation. There's no need to force this through to a particular time scale. Take it as far as you need to go. Newcastle have been very, very public about their interest. They've been very, very happy to brief about the deal at all stages. And I think, despite the mixed reaction amongst Newcastle fans, which you sometimes see in the Twitter sphere, they're excited about this player. They want it to happen. And if there is any complication at this stage of the deal, it's going to be solved with money, and that can only be to our advantage.
Demps, do you think, looking at it, that Newcastle seem to be the only team coming in for him? You know, none of the Liverpools or the Chelseas or the Arsenals or the Man Cities, you know, are coming in for him, which I'm a little bit surprised at, because I think, you know, in one of those teams, you know, are expected to, you know, vie for the Premier League title, might have come in and said, right, you know, we can take a chance here. You know, look at the pace, look what he brings to a team, look what he did for Nottingham Forest last season. So it surprises me a little bit that Newcastle, if that's the case, are the only team coming in for him.
Yeah, fair play. They've seen how he would work in their team, haven't they? The explosive pace is one thing, but there is a deftness of touch and a quality player in there. I remember the goal he scored in pre-season in Greece, where he had a bit of a mazy run through 3 or 4 players and finished really calmly. But having watched him for the last couple of seasons, Gary, we've seen that calmness, haven't we? We've seen the finishing inside the box. We've seen the manner in which he times his runs, and we've seen the manner in which he can turn defence into attack. So he has to profile to a certain type of team. I don't think he'd necessarily be as effective in a possession-based side where he's playing against more of a deeper, compact defence. He's at his best, but he's running at a broken field. And that's what a lot of his Forest highlights are: the assist for Callum Hudson-Odoi at Liverpool, the run from deep against Chelsea. If he finds himself, let's say, in another universe, Saka goes to Real Madrid and he finds himself on the right wing for Arsenal, teams defend against Arsenal very differently to how they defend against Forest. He wouldn't necessarily be as effective. So I do see the logic of why he fits into the Newcastle side. And I'm not entirely surprised that any of the traditional Big Four, Big Five haven't jumped in for him. But I do think he can make an impact in that side. And if we look at the players that have been given a chance at Man United, well, they've cut the losses on him. They've made a huge mistake there, because he could have been a real star performer in a Man United side. It's just been a graveyard for wingers over the past 2 seasons.
Do you think, well, we should move on soon, really, but just quickly, Gary, do you think a front three of Isak, Gordon, Elanga doesn't guarantee them top 4 football, but it puts them in a very strong place for next season, doesn't it?
It does, without a doubt. I mean, what they achieved last season is incredible. And like I said before, I'm delighted that, you know, teams like that are coming in. We thought West Ham were going to do that when they, you know, breached into the top 6, and you know, they look where they finished last season. You know, so it can, you know, quickly turn around if the other teams that are in and around the top, your Brightons, your Bournemouth, you know, add and do well. I'll tell you what, it could be a really interesting season for the Bournemouths, the Brentfords, because they're losing their top players. You know, and they could really be, you know, in a little bit of trouble. So that'd be interesting as well. We're in a great position at Forest because of, you know, Mr. Marinakis. You know, the money he invests, the money we're able to spend, the players with the quality that we can bring in, and you know, we've got to be so grateful for that. And you just want to build on last season. It's not going to be easy. You know, you look at Tottenham, you look at Manchester United, where they finished. And, you know, it can easily go wrong. You know, like I say, it could go wrong for Newcastle. It's gone wrong for those 2 massive teams who've always been up there in the top 6. You know, as you think it's a right for them to be in the top 6. It doesn't always work like that. If you don't get it right off the pitch and bring the right recruitment in, you can finish where they did. And they've now got to bounce back, those 2 teams. And that's not going to be easy. So, you know, like I say, careful what you wish for sometimes. If Elanga was 26 or something like that, 27 maybe, but he's still quite young and he's still got, you know, a lot of time ahead of him. He's found his place in the Premier League, you know, by right, and I'd just be very sad to see him go.
Gary's led nicely into our next topic there, but just before that, over 500 people watching, which is lovely. Do us a favour and hit like if you haven't already. Coming up at the Trent Navigation, the British Lions tour, you can watch it all at the Nav, Saturday the 29th of July, the 26th of July, and then straight into Saturday, August the 2nd. They're all on. It looks like they all kick off at 10 a.m. and you can get your breakfast there, and the Guinness will be flowing as it says on the screen. So thanks for that for the Nav. Also coming up, our live show is not too far away, 25th of July. Temps has selfishly booked a holiday now, so he won't be at it. But it's only a £5 for a ticket. Calvin Lewis on stage, and we've got 2 really good raffle prizes. One I'll raffle, one I'll auction, because to try and make some more money for charity. Signed Callum Hudson-Odoi shirt, signed Murillo shirt in a big LED frame. I've got all the certificates for authenticity. Shout out for listener Jim Wheat, who's given them to us for free to make money for charity. So you can get your tickets, £5 for gigantic.com. Trying to win those shirts, it's probably worth a £5 anyway. So do come along if you can to that one. Right, let's talk Ola Aina a little bit more than Temps. One of the things I was worried about was Elanga goes, maybe teams smell blood, as they seem to have done with Bournemouth, as Gary referenced, and you get a bit of a cascade and a dominoes fall, and we lose 3 players. But Nico signs a new deal, and according to David Ornstein Athletic, which is basically gospel, Aina signed a 3-year deal as well. So even just we kind of expected this to happen, but the fact it has happened is sort of a statement. Like as Gary says, we're not going to be primed for picking off by the big boys this summer, hopefully.
I was just laughing at Super Mario in the comments, who rightly pointed out that I lost interest in the quiz when my takeaway and my girlfriend turned up, and now I've pinned off the live show as well, which is a fair point. But yeah, I can safely say I've just signed a new 5-year contract with Forest Focus as well, so there's no problem there. Yeah, what a signing! I mean, keeping the band together as much as we can in and around the inevitable trading in any particular summer is so important. And no, I don't think that one player leaving will ever affect the core of the squad if you have the foresight to tie them to long-term deals. Last year, Murillo, 4.5-year contract. Milenkovic comes in on a 5-year contract. Nico and Ola locked down. I mean, what an absolute bedrock that is. It's going to take an awful lot of money to extract any of those 4 players, which can be starters in any competition for as long as we want them to be now, 4 or 5 seasons. I think it's just such shrewd business. There's a player that we've done everything right with, signed for a song, added so much value to, integrated into a squad, really serious footballer, clearly an entertaining fella off the pitch as well. I think that those 2 bits of business are going to be as important as any transfer that we bring in. Rate him so highly, and delighted that he plays for my football club.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that worries me about Aina is, when on the pitch, if we get a massive heavy downpour for 35 minutes, his shorts will weigh him down.
That's the punditry that we bring Gary in for.
They are I've ever seen ever on a player. But it don't matter. It don't matter. It could be down to his ankles. He'll still be as good. He's just his creative element is so good. And Nico on, they give us such width, such pace, and such creative ability in that final third. And there, you go back to Elanga, that might alleviate that a little bit. We can work that, around that and get Callum Hudson-Odoi in, hopefully keep him fit on a regular basis. So, those options now are still there for us because those 2 players, thank goodness, have signed, new contracts.
Guys, just on that point of judging transfers retrospectively, was anybody excited when we signed Ola Aina? Did anybody truly know what he was after a bit of a time out of our spotlight, at least in Italy, and a seasons on loan at Fulham and Hull? It was totally unexpected.
Had you heard of him?
Nope. I had no idea. Came through with barely a whisper. Squad player. He could be loaned out. Oh no, he's an absolute boss. Well, and he would start any game he's available for.
Well, that is how important recruitment is. I think it's it's one of the top things at a football club, that you get the recruitment right, you get the right people in there to get the right players in there. And you've got to give Ross Wilson, so much credit, and the football club for the way they've gone about it. Because, everybody was very critical, and they were laughing about the number of players, we were signing a few seasons ago. and that's stopped, and we're now getting the quality in there. And it's not always about seeing the top players who are on the transfer list. You have to look and you have to look and see beyond that and say, well, I've heard about this lad. Let's go and see him. Let's go and see him again. Let's go and see him again. And that's what recruitment's all about. It's not always going for the big players. It's going, to get a diamond, like Milenkovic. I can't believe nobody went for him after the Euros, because he was one of the best players in Euros, without a doubt. So, it is, I hope we don't lose Ross Wilson. If we're going to lose Elanga to Newcastle, we don't want to lose him as well. Then you've got to bring somebody else in, and that could be something that is going to be difficult as well, because the pressure's then on him after what Ross Wilson's done to go out and find the right players to add to the squad. So again, it's going to be an interesting few weeks, and I'm looking forward to hopefully seeing some signings. I can look every day and think, well, we're not signed anybody yet, but we have now. We signed this lad for 10 million. And he looks, on the basis of it, I've not heard of him at all, I've got to admit, but he did well in the World Club Championship, scored against Paris Saint-Germain, and he's a striker, so give a bit of competition for Chris. And I forgot the other one. He got injured.
Highway, yeah.
So he brings more pressure there. I'm sure we'll be looking for another striker. But yeah, it's one of those things. Every club goes through the same thing in every division. If it's a Championship, First Division, Second Division, everybody wants to go out there and pick the right players, and it's a difficult job because everybody else is battling to get those players as well. So sometimes you have to go further afield and take a chance on somebody that somebody else doesn't.
Hey, Gaz, someone's just said, imagine your transfer fee and wages in the modern era. You'd have more than a 3-bed in Wilmslow.
Don't remind him.
It's a 3-bed. Hey, this is how stupid I am, Tim. I bought it in 1980 for £62,000, and 2.5 years later, went past and it was for sale. 250 grand it went for. That's how stupid I was.
Thanks to David, Dave, and Mark in the chat. Forest had just announced Aina's contract officially, so 3 years confirmed, which is great news. One thing just on that, a couple more things actually, but one before we go back to Igor Jesus. Temps, are you surprised, as Gary was saying, like Man City have let Kyle Walker go, and we'll touch on that as well. Are you surprised that no one's come in for Ola? Is it just he's 29 in October? Is that the only reason?
I've seen two instances of like the end of Kyle Walker, really. One was his performance at the City Ground for England, where he just looked like someone's dad had turned up for a game to fill in a right back. He was just nowhere. The other moment was Ola Aina ghosting past him in the league game at the City Ground and just cruising away from Kyle Walker, who for so long was such a good player for England, absolute pace merchant, was just the right back that no Premier League winger wanted to face up against. And now, even a year ago, you could see that Ola Aina had just come so far past that level. And yeah, I do think he could be. You look at him and you probably would assess that his physical strength isn't where Kyle Walker's is, but there's a real footballer there. And the manner in which he carries the ball, you very, very rarely see him spray it long. Very, very comfortable passing. I love the way he's comfortable in traffic. He'll have the extra touch. He'll delay for that half a second and see how the opposing player reacts. You just got someone who just executes his skills under pressure again and again and again. And the only question mark he has is, as Gaz says, is not just his shorts. His legs look a bit heavy in the last 10, 15 minutes because he does exert a high energy version of playing that position. But he's a modern fullback. You can launch attacks through him. You can play a wide pass from the centre half from the keeper, and he's always going to be comfortable on the ball. He's one of the reasons why we've seen this transition from being a defensively minded team that's trying to grind out a draw to being on the attack. I rate him really, really highly. And yes, I am surprised that Champions League clubs haven't looked at him as a potential transfer target, because his fee could be significant. But he's not in the market for a move. We're not in the market to sell. We don't need to. And I do believe that he's happy at Forest and will be an important part of the story from here.
Yeah, I mean, I am surprised. It's really great news that he's staying, but when you look at Newcastle, don't sign any more of our players, but they probably need a Trippier replacement. Spurs, United, City, Aston Villa look like they're looking for a right back, and none of these teams are coming for him. That does surprise me because he's so good, and maybe it is just the fact he's going to be 29. You don't want to invest 30 million quid or whatever it is, 20 million quid, but it does surprise me. Just lastly, Gary, on this one before we move on, this is stating the obvious, but to have our back four tied down on long-term contracts, it puts us in a very strong position for at least the next year and hopefully more, doesn't it?
Oh, massively. I mean, that was a big part of why we did so well last season. That back line was superb. With Matt Sells, obviously, one of the best goalkeepers in the Premier League. That was one of the big bonuses for me because we've had so many goalkeepers over the past few seasons, and to finally get somebody like him who did what he did for us last season, he was magnificent. He's a great shot stopper, takes the pressure off the defenders in front of him, and I know how important it is to have a goalkeeper like that behind you. When I played centre half, I was lucky to have Van Breukelen and people like that. Even at Grimsby at the end of my career, I had Steve Sherwood. And you know how important goalkeepers are, what they do. They're shouting all the time. They're telling you what's going on because they can see the whole picture. So to get somebody like him to do what he did for us was just absolutely superb. And that gives the defence in front so much confidence, believe me. If you've got somebody behind you who you think, I'm not sure about this, what's he going to do? Then you're dithering as well. Dithering promotes dithering. And with Sells being as confident and as commanding as he is, it takes the pressure right off the players in front.
Simon T says, Temps Lookings called you at the wedding on Thursday. Branching off, Temps, did you wear the same suit as you wore to Emily's wedding? Or does a man of your calibre have an array of suave suits in the cupboard?
It was certainly a different shirt and tie. The jacket may have got a second airing, but you can only rotate your wardrobe so far as we unless you're Garry Birtles and just have the entire Ted Baker warehouse cleared to your garage.
It's over, Ted Baker. I've got to look elsewhere, Temps.
Paul Smith will sort you out. Don't worry. For those who aren't aware, Temps rocked up at Emily's wedding looking like he owned a horse running in the Cheltenham Gold Cup. To be honest, he could have been mixing with Arab sheikhs, certainly. So a man of style.
What's our invite?
I don't know. Sorry.
Come on.
Well, ask Emily when she's back. She's back on. She's on honeymoon at the moment, living it up. Thank you, Peter. 538 people, 550 now watching. So do us a favour and hit like. That would make a very big difference. Just before we go to break quickly, just before we move on away from Igor Jesus, you touched on him there, Gary. We've been debating this one as well. Is that our striker business done, or do we need another one, or do we sign a winger who can play through the middle at a push? What would you like us to do?
I don't think the transfer, business is done. I like to think not, because we are very progressive now, and we're in Europe at the moment, so players will still want to come to us, despite that, because the Champions League is the top of the list. And all the top players will want to go there, but we're still in Europe, and players will still want to come to us because of that. And hopefully, the recruitment will bring in another striker. We got Milenkovic. What was it? 12 million quid.
Yeah.
And we've got this lad for 10 million quid. Let's just hope he's another one who comes out, and just proves everybody that what a good player he is and what a great investment he's been for that money, because that 10 million quid for a striker is a very, very, very good business. He's not that old, and if he takes to the Premier League, which is not always easy, then who knows, we might just get another diamond.
A lot of love for Johan Wisser in the chat. Again, 29 in a couple of weeks. I don't think we've got your take on him, Gary. I think he scored 19 goals from open play last season. Is he the one, or is he maybe a bit too old for where the market we operate in?
Well, I don't know. He's got that devilment about him, hasn't he? Him and Wayno were so good for Brentford, and he's got the pace. He loves taking players on. He gets beyond people. Yeah, your legs get a little bit weary as you get a little bit older. But for 2 seasons, if somebody can take him for 2 seasons, he could be a massive signing for somebody. Why not go for him? And if Elanga does go, he could be part of the answer.
Brentford are in a really, really tough position with the manager going, huge gamble on the replacement, and Bromo's going. Just looking at Wissa, he's going to be 29. He's got a year left on his contract. So what is his market value, really? Do you want to come in there, Thames?
Just that. It's a seller's market there, isn't it? Brentford find themselves at a bit of a crossroads. He probably senses they're not going to be as competitive next year. It'd be real tough for someone to reinvoke that culture with the changes and the tags that are being put on some of his teammates as well. It just feels like the potential breaking up of the band at Brentford. Would I take a chance at 29? Well, yeah, he's match ready, isn't he? And it would be a departure from our recruitment style. So whilst I love the player, it feels such an unlikely transfer for Forest, because you'd have to pay way above the odds for someone that's tried and tested in the Premier League, and that just hasn't been our method to this point. Will we see a change now? We're trying to move from the upstarts to part of the establishment and trying to consolidate a top 10 position in the Premier League, or a annual trip to Europe. I don't know. I'm just not quite sure at this point. We've got the PSR headroom to be doing something like that, which could unintentionally lead to a pretty reckless situation where you have to offload a Gibbs White or a Murillo. So I'd be stunned if Forest were in the market for that type of transfer.
Well, could I just mention somebody called Chris Wood?
That's what I was going to do. Yeah,
who came in.
Me to it.
Yeah, who did unbelievably well. I mean, last season he was up there with the best strikers in the Premier League, without a doubt. His age is maybe a little bit of a concern, but what he did last season was incredible. So you can take a chance sometime on players who are a little bit older. Age, the fitness levels are very, very high now, and you see players playing on till the 37, 38. I mean, look at Ronaldo's fitness now. He's still playing, and he's still playing for the national team. He is probably a one-off. Like Messi, he's still going strong. But who's to say other players can't do that? It's easy to write them off too easily and say, "Oh well, he's too old." And I think people could miss out on players like that, and because just saying they're too old.
Guys, I'd have a little look at the Man United market. They've got to offload players. The manner in which they have to sell is slightly different. They'll be on inflated wages, but there's deals to be done. I think there's a collection of players at Man United who will find themselves moving to clubs who they wouldn't necessarily have wished to be looking at this point in their career, by virtue of the fact that Man U have had this kind of seismic fall from grace at this moment of time, and there's such a desire for change. So, Garnacho and the players in that kind of bracket will find themselves on the move. And I think if Forest are to sign from a Premier League club, it's more likely to be that type of player who perhaps finds himself in the wrong environment, wrong situation, trying to find a change, rather than someone like that who would cause a bit of a global auction.
What, like Elanga, you mean?
No, I was thinking more comparing them to Wissa, comparing that situation of extracting a player from a Premier League club is tough and expensive, as Newcastle are finding out with Elanga. And if we're to go and do the same, I think it would be pretty tough in a summer window for us to justify that level of expense when there are other players around and about who could have a fresh start. And I've pulled Garnacho's name out of the air. I don't think he's a serious target, but those players do exist where the circumstances reduce the fee rather than the back of a super successful season where it's inflated. I just think the Wissa signing would be too tough.
I think the thing in Wissa's favour as well is his injury record is exceptional, so I don't mind the fee necessarily. I was going to try and have a look at Man U's squad and try and examine a few more names.
So's their manager.
We're going way off track here, throwing crazy names out there. I mean, Mason Mount must be available, but they wouldn't sell him because it would be PSR. He'd be a really risky sign. He's had 2-3 terrible years But you think back 3 or 4 years, he was a top England player. So yeah, we've gone way off track there, certainly. But I think there's interesting deals to be done. Right, just before we start to wrap things up in the final third of the show, quick word for Global Telemetrics, a very short video as ever.
Here we are in the ringing shop now. So busted in action, disrupting criminality, together we can, West Midlands Police.
Another chop shop being busted up by Global Telemetrics with the police, obviously. So check out the link in the description for globaltelemetrics.com if you want to protect your vehicle, whether it's a car, van, whatever. They are the people for you. Just a quick note, Tyler Bindon joined Sheffield United on loan for a season, which feels like a really good move for him. Obviously reunited with his coach at Reading, Ruben Sellers, I think it was. So that should serve him well. I just wanted to touch on a few other bits in the Premier League around the promoted clubs. Gary, we mentioned Kyle Walker. I know he's a fading force, but he's probably still a good player, especially for a club like Burnley. I'm going to abandon everything. We haven't mentioned Callum Hudson-Odoi potentially signing a new contract properly. Let's just touch on that quickly, Gary. His reps are in Athens. His reps are his brother, who's his agent. So they're in talks with Marinakis. We should say that would be huge news, wouldn't it? Because we can't lose 2 starting wingers, can we, this summer?
No, it would be fabulous news. He's had his problems with injury, but a fit Callum Hudson-Odoi is, something to behold when he's, same as Elanga, when he's taking players on. He's a handful. He's prepared to do that in the final third. And, he's one of those creative elements that you want there in that final third, because he's a striker's dream, as is Elanga. If I was playing up front and I was Chris Wood, I'd be delighted, as Chris was, because, look at the number of goals he scored. You're beholden on supply, and Elanga and Hudson-Odoi to supply on a regular basis, along with Morgan Gibbs-White. So, yeah, if he stays, then let's hope he has a good pre-season, keeps himself fit, because he was another one who people were doubting before he came to Forest. There were big questions about, he's got the ability. We know he's got the ability, but he's not really doing it on a regular basis. But coming to this football club of ours, the number of players, you see them. I always repeat this. Every time they won last season, it's like we've won the Champions League or the FA Cup or whatever. The togetherness that you saw on the pitch at the end of games was absolutely incredible. And that's down to Nuno and the backroom staff and everybody at the club. You want that sort of atmosphere at a football club. You don't want bad eggs coming in to your football club. Brian Clough was always very, very strong on getting the right characters in his football club. You didn't want a bad element in there. People will say, well, Larry Lloyd and Kenny Burns, but they weren't a bad, they were very outspoken, very forthright, but they did the job unbelievably well. And, I think that's one of the most important things, getting that right character within the dressing room who doesn't destabilise it, who just blends in no matter how good he is. I'll go back to Trevor Francis when he came to the club, first £1 million player. He fitted in unbelievably well. He was made to make the tee on his first game. He played him in the A team down at Nottingham University on a Saturday morning. We went to watch, and he was brought in like that. But Trev was brilliant. There was no big, star in him, big time Charlie. He came in and he was fantastic. People say, well, first £1 million player, I bet he's a big head or something like that. He couldn't be further from the truth. He was absolutely unbelievable. And that's how good you have to be with recruitment. Not just getting the player that's there, because we've seen some of the players at United they brought in, and they're failing miserably at the moment. So it's not about that, footballer. It's about the whole package. If you want a full rounded person within your dressing room, and I was always lucky enough to have that, wherever I went. And I know how important it is if you do get one bad egg in dressing room, it can disrupt it. So it's very important to get the right people in.
Talking of bad eggs, Anthony, there was a member that said Elanga not showing today. Goal. I'm sure he's got permission, Anthony. I'm not reading anything into that he's not in training, even if it's to do with his transfer. I can't imagine it's anything to do with him not showing up.
I did agree a little bit there, Matt, because the number of players I've been involved with who didn't show up for pre-season training usually disappear from the club. So
I'm sure he'll go. Yeah.
I think it is a little bit worrying, but he goes. There's nothing we can do about it. We've just got to move on and just prepare for the season. Yeah, it'd be sad. Wish him all the best, and get somebody in to replace him, and just go again at the start of the season. The fixture list we've got for the start of the season looks pretty good for us. If we have a good start to the season, which is possible, then who knows.
Don't read too much into him not being at training, but he will be off about Thursday.
Yeah, I think that's what I meant. I'm not. Maybe I misconstrued Anthony there. Just making it. Yeah, I read it like, oh, he's gone on strike, and no, he hasn't. So, as what Temp said and what Garry said as well. Right. Let's go back to what I was going to talk about. This is what happens when you put all your notes in the wrong place, and you go back to your phone, and then you forget where you're meant to be. Promoted clubs having a go is what I've written down here. Temps. Kyle Walker, we referenced. Sunderland have signed Diarra for 30 million. The Senegal midfielder who did well against England. They've signed another player who I've not heard of for 15 million. They're making some ambitious moves or links, certainly. Promoted clubs, I don't know, can we see them breaking through or not? I thought it's worth referencing that they seem to be doing better deals this year than last 2 years, certainly.
Well, whilst we grumble about the odds being stacked against anyone breaking into the top 5, we should probably celebrate the fact, given our relative position now, that it's really hard to come from the Championship and stay up. There were 3 up, 3 down last season. And outside of our class, in which Bournemouth and Fulham also managed to avoid the drop, that feels like a pretty unlikely set of circumstances from this point onwards. It's so hard to wait that late, to have to do your recruitment, to have to get your squad Premier League ready. Such is the gulf between the top of the Championship and the bottom of the top tier. So I think it's right to show ambition. I hate the Norwich, West Brom method of years ago of coming up, accepting you're not going to spend the money and try and be a bit of a yo-yo club. I like to see teams having a go. And yeah, look, Kyle Walker will still have a bit to offer. Jokes aside, he'll manage to hold his own in the Premier League. He's just not going to dominate as he once did. So that makes sense for Burnley. I'm sure he'll be great off the pitch and add a bit of steer and unity and leadership and nous to that dressing room. But when I reflect on our journey, did we get more out of Jesse Lingard, or did we get more out of, I don't know, insert player here that did pretty well for us in that first season? You can't just rely on assessing players who were great 5 years ago. You do need to use your scouting network to unearth some players from slightly further afield who were perhaps unfancied and managed to find a way in the Premier League. So good on Sunderland, they're having a go. Good on Burnley, they're starting to make moves and to shore up a defence which was the most impressive in the Championship last season. But I think the dice loaded against them, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if all 3 are relegated.
I was what I was going to ask just before we start wrapping things up. Garry, promoted 3, very early days. Promoted 3 to go back down, or do you see another team in bother?
Well, we've already spoke about Brentford losing, key players. Bournemouth losing key players. They could get sucked into that down there, and those 3 teams coming up might look at that and think, yeah, that we could probably buck the trend and stay up, and they might get sucked into it. We don't know, but it's so difficult coming up from the Championship now. No matter who you buy, no matter what you pay, it's the Premier League, And we saw, Burnley, Southampton came up and tried to play the way that Man City played, playing out from the back. The goalkeeper was making so many mistakes, it was ridiculous. And they're more or less relegated by Christmas, the pair of them. You can't do that. You have to play with the players you have in your squad, not because Man City play like it. People are saying about Pep Guardiola, you can't play his way. Not everybody can do it. Newcastle booked the trend with that. They play their way. And I've got a lot of respect for Eddie Howe in that respect. Don't just do what everybody else is doing. We didn't do that. Play what suits the players you've got in your squad. Be brave about it. Don't feel you have to go backwards, square. It's use the long ball like Newcastle did. They've got players who can exploit defences when that happens. Defenders hate facing their own goal. So play the way that your club plays better. Don't just copy people for the sake of it, because you saw what happened to Southampton, Burnley. If you haven't got the players to do it, which they clearly didn't at the back, you're going to get relegated. Simple as that.
Just wrapping things up, the only thing I was going to mention, not really for discussion, but the manager was pictured at Diogo Jota's funeral. So just wanted to mention that, because obviously he had such a strong link with him, bringing him to this country for Wolves and working so closely with him. And Nico played with him at Liverpool. Morgan played with him at Wolves. Willy Bolly at Wolves. So I'm sure it's touched the Forest squad. Sad news from last week as well.
Absolutely shocking. I couldn't believe it. I got a message on my phone saying sad news about, sad news about him. And I looked on the BBC straight away and there was nothing. So somebody obviously heard quickly. And then when I saw it, you think, oh, my word. Just so sad. I mean, losing Trevor and losing Larry, from our squad, it's really horrible. But, this lad's 28, for goodness sake, his whole life in front of him. And to lose it, he just got married, 3 kids, just so sad. So sad.
Yeah, massively. Awful. Right, that was everything I wanted to cover today. We'll be back tomorrow with some sort of transfer talk around wingers that Forest could bring in. A couple of lads have put a few names together. Take it seriously if you want. Don't take it seriously if you want, but it's just interesting anyway. Thames, any final thoughts? Anything you want to add before we go?
Just an open question for the listeners and viewers. Is anybody not going to get Jesus 99 on the back of their Forest shirt? It's going to outnumber every single alternative, isn't it?
You'd think so. Yeah, it's an exciting signing. I'm looking forward to see who else we bring in. Certainly, if there will be any rivals. Gary, any final thoughts? Anything you want to add before we go?
No, it's not really. I mean, it's the people, the players have come back pre-season. I know how difficult pre-seasons are. With the temperatures that are going to come our way, apparently this coming weekend, pre-season could be horrible, but if it's warm and it's red hot, it's even more difficult. So just want everybody to, come back fit and well, start the season, and, really looking forward to hopefully building on what we did last season. It's not going to be easy, but, it's possible without a doubt. So, let's look forward to the season. Let's not be negative and, let's, just cheer them on as we've always done. The Forest fans have been brilliant, best fans in the country. Yeah, let's just go for it again.
And before you do that, get down to Trent Bridge on Friday night, because as Gary said, it's going to be 30 degrees, cracking the flags, and not so going to beat Durham at Trent Bridge.
Yeah, Friday night sorted. Saturday, Chesterfield away is the first friendly, so we're back into it really after this week. So lots coming up. Join us for all that if you can. If you've enjoyed this, do us a favour, hit like, hit subscribe. Do consider membership or Patreon, or just give us a lovely 5-star review on Apple or Spotify. And as mentioned, we shall be back tomorrow. Garry Birtles, lovely to have you with us. Thank you very much.
Pleasure, as always.
Certainly was. Michael Temple, thank you very much.
See you soon, fellas.
Yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks for your company today, everyone. And if we don't see you tomorrow, then we shall see you soon.